To our special 20th anniversary of Auto ID Labs special keynote and panel discussion. First half of the session is going to be an address by somebody who, if you've been involved with RFID, really needs no introduction. Professor Sanjay Sarma from MIT. He has been involved in this industry for over 2 decades, helped create the Auto ID Labs, which became the Auto ID Center, has spearheaded numerous efforts in this industry. Particularly, one of our favorites is the creation of the Gen 2 protocol, which still reigns supreme downstairs, and the technology has really unified a lot of the efforts in RFID. There's won numerous awards, and I'd like to just introduce Sanjay Sarma.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Thank you. I'm going to come down and I want to make this interactive, okay? So I might cold call you to say something. I won't, no, I'm just kidding. When we launched, it's actually 20 years, 1998, Matt was were you still undergrad at that time?
I was probably a master's student.
You were a master's student at MIT, and a few of us had some of these crazy notions. At that time, the new game in town was the internet. And when we launched the Auto ID Center, the big play was to take advantage of the internet. It was basically saying, let's dumb the tag down, put data in the sky. And that led to many possibilities, because now you could strip the tag down, the protocols became very simple, Gen 1, Gen 0, very simple protocols, and then eventually we created Gen 2. Now, 20 years later, I feel we're on the threshold of another revolution. And I wanted to maybe talk about that. By the way, I had a big presentation about past, etc. And then I realized that Dr. Pavel Nikitin had given an extraordinary presentation on that already. So I didn't want to repeat that. So instead, let's talk a little bit more about the future. And to me, the future is, in fact, the Internet of Things. And I'm not a huge fan of the term, although the term apparently came from our efforts. One of our colleagues and a co-founder of a company with Matt, Kevin Ashton, is the first I heard the term from. It's a beautiful term. But let me talk a little bit about the Internet of Things. And let me start with a question. Is the Internet of Things a platform? What do you think? Is it something you can buy? Can you buy the Internet of Things? Can you buy love? No, you can't buy the Internet of Things, right? It's not a platform. Is it a technology? What is it, right? So I've really wrestled with this question for a long time. And I came to the conclusion about 5 years ago that it is none of the above or all of the above, which is equally bad. I came to the conclusion that the Internet of Things is actually a design language. So what do I mean by a design language? So let's take a step back. Think about the art and craft of architecture, the language of architecture. There's a building, someone had to design it, there's a language. There is a language here. And think of this language before electricity and after electricity. So before electricity was invented, you didn't have lighting. So when you built a building, you had to put in stained glass windows. You had to put in an oculus in the dome. You had to have places for candles. Things were dark, so you were limited in what you could do. After electricity was invented, you can operate in a cave. This is basically a cave because there's artificial lighting. So the language of design has changed. You did not have, before electricity, you could not pump water. So you couldn't have an upstairs bathroom. After electricity, you could do that. So you could pump water up. Before electricity, you didn't have heating, except through fireplaces. So if you look at all the medieval castles and churches in Europe, cold part of the world, you had to have fireplaces. And you couldn't have cooling. So the doors were big, so you could get a wind through, and the construction was stone. you didn't have elevators, so the buildings couldn't be very tall. It was Otis in Massachusetts, actually, who invented the elevator. And now we have skyscrapers. So electricity has changed the language of design of buildings. IoT, in my view, is going to fundamentally change the language of business, right? So with that, let me segue into a second topic, which is, what does it mean to change the language of business? What do you want to do with this language, and what is this language? So to inspire that, I want to make a second sort of point here. There was a Harvard Business School professor by the name of Theodore Levitt, and in about 650 years ago, he said to, I think it was Black & Decker, you know Black & Decker, the drill company? He said, when you sell a drill, are you selling a drill or are you selling a hole? What do people really want? Do they want to buy a drill? Or do they just want a hole? What do you think? Okay, by the way, can you think of a company that sells holes? This is a tough one. Think of a company that sells holes. Not Dunkin' Donuts.
Golf course.
Yeah, sort of. I'll give you an example. I'll give you my answer. IKEA sells holes. IKEA sells assemblable furniture with the holes pre-installed, pre-drilled. In a very strange way, if there's an IKEA store in a neighborhood, people will buy fewer drills because there's no need for them. You understand? So where am I going with this? This design language, electricity, changed the way in which we design buildings. And now you could give people what they wanted. Now, what I'm trying to say now is, when you really think about what people want, if you can give it to them, which is holes, they don't need to buy drills. This lets you redesign businesses. So let's do a couple more examples. Ford sells you cars. Why do you buy cars? Why do you buy a car? Travel. Do you really want a car, or are you actually looking for something else? You're actually not looking for a car. You're looking for transportation. Who gives you transportation? Uber. Right? Ford thought it was in the business of selling you cars. And we got trained into buying cars. But then suddenly, people realized, I don't want the damn car. I don't want to deal with parking. I don't want to deal with the snow. I'm from Boston, right? I don't want to deal with insurance. I don't want to deal with accidents, right? I just want to get there. And Uber comes along and gives you the ability to just get there. What enables Uber? What made Uber possible? Is Uber an IoT company? What do you think? Could be. Yeah. I think Uber is an IoT company. Yeah. What's happened with Uber is, this thing is the magic package of IoT. It takes a dumb car, you put it in the car, and it becomes a smart car. You can track it, you can communicate with it, and the driver is simply the automaton, right? What is Uber trying to do now? It's trying to get rid of the driver. So this is the magic package of IoT. And it fundamentally changes the business of transportation. And Ford and GM and all these guys are in big trouble as a result. Because they thought people wanted cars. People didn't want cars. People wanted transportation. It's a pretty fundamental change. I'll give you a piece of statistics. Before Uber, in San Francisco, taxi sales were $200 million. Right? After Uber took off in San Francisco, taxi sales dropped, as you might imagine, because Uber took some of those sales. Do you know how much the sales of taxis went down to? Guess. From 200 to what? A few thousand. Someone else? $200 million, we said it went down by a few thousand or to a few thousand?
It could be 15 to 20,000
dollars. Okay, anyone else? From $200 million, how much did taxi sales drop to, do you think, after Uber? Say it again?
20 million?
20 million. The answer, it turns out, is it went from taxi sales, went from 200 to 120. So they dropped by 40%. What do you think Uber sales were the same year? Guess. What?
More than 80 million.
More than 80 million? How much do you think? 100 million? 160? The answer is 500 million. I'm trying to make a point here. The point is, if you think of Uber as a form of taxi, Uber plus taxi went from 200 to 620 million. So who lost? Who lost? The car companies, insurance companies, right? Parking companies.
We still need cars for Uber, so we still...
Because they buy, no, but it's a highly used car. It's called utilization. So the same car, it's a sharing economy. The one car is now used all the time. So individuals don't buy cars. By the way, Ford responded by buying a company called Chariot, which is a sort of a bus that goes around picking people up, right? Then they want to go to autonomous self-driving buses where it's sort of like Uber Pool, like a big version of Uber Pool. All this is enabled by technology. It's all enabled by connectivity, sensors, GPS, etc. But what I'm trying to say is more fundamental, that we should not think of IoT as just a way to do something you do today just slightly better. IoT is a way to fundamentally reinvent the business. Because a lot of companies are caught in the mindset of delivering products. But they're missing what people really want, which is one level closer, getting closer to them. And if you can figure that out, you can change industry. Amazon's doing the same thing, for example, with the Amazon Echo and the Amazon Dot. Because I don't want to go to the grocery store. I just want to do this and stuff shows up. And that's what the Echo and the Dot do. Airbnb is doing the same thing. Airbnb said, I don't want a hotel room, I just want a place to stay. Right? Is Airbnb an IoT company? What do you think, yes or no? It did not start off an IoT company, but it quickly turned into one. Why? Because you don't want to be up at 7 a.m. handing off a key to someone. So internet control locks have become absolutely an essential part of Airbnb. Because now you can email a key. You don't have to meet the person at 7 a.m. Right? So we are in the middle of a transformation. Now let's come to RFID. To me, RFID, what we've achieved in 20 years is pretty spectacular, it's exciting, it's amazing, etc., etc. But I actually think this is only the first step in a much bigger journey. We're in a very special time today, where technology is becoming so powerful thanks to all the extraordinary work that we see coming out of academics, industry, inventors. Technology is becoming like magic. It is less now about technology and more about that idea. If you have that idea where you can sense someone's need and provide that need, you know, more and more the technology can probably make it happen because the design language is so much more powerful. Do you know how Uber was founded, by the way? Does anyone know the story of how Uber was founded? It's a very, very beautiful story. The two founders, Garrett Camp and Travis Kalanick, who recently got fired from Uber because they had other issues with ethics. That's a whole other story. But the two of them were waiting in Paris for taxis. And as you know, it was raining or sleeting. And in Paris, as you know, sometimes it's difficult to get a taxi. And they were getting irritated. And one of them turns to the other and says, I wish I could do this. And a taxi showed up. And the other guy looks at him and says, dude, I know how to do it. And that was the founding. That's how Uber got founded. The two of them went back to San Francisco. They were from the Bay Area. And they said, you know, we have smartphones. We'll put one app for the driver, one app for the user, put stuff in the cloud, GPS. They dived into the automotive, the taxi industry. They understood the regulations. They understood how to violate every rule, which is a whole other story. They rolled out in San Francisco, and then they rolled out in a few other cities, Boston, New York, etc. Then they rolled out in other countries, and then around the world. But that's the power of technology, right? Just as electricity is a new design language, technology is becoming a design language. And IoT is a very powerful piece of that. And what we are able to do, us, the technologists, is invent new capabilities, new verbs, and new nouns that didn't exist even 5 years ago. So every time you invent something new, you're adding a verb to the vernacular or a noun to the language so that someone else, or perhaps you, can have an idea and string together a narrative with these new concepts that fundamentally reinvents a business. So every time someone says, well, when Matt says, I have a way to do, use millimeter wave to read a tag from a high distance, for us it's a paper. But somewhere else, someone else is thinking, I wish I could string together a whole new way to do, farming or transportation. Very special, magical time. RFID is going to be, I think, as this technology is matured and as we find different ways to do stuff, different ranges, different power consumption, bandwidth, I think it's going to be a very central piece of this. So as you know, in the Internet of Things, there are now new technologies like LPWAN, low power wide area networks, LoRa, Sigfox, NB-IoT, all that stuff, right? To me, RFID is LPLAN, low power local area networking. It's not just RFID. Of course, we started with RFID to ID, but it's RF communication. It's local sensing. It's actually potentially a sort of a crazy transport layer because it's so low power. Let BLE and all these other technologies attack places where there is power. We can attack the places where there is no power. We can light up the physical world, the things that can't be connected, but not just to get the ID, but to do a lot more. And I'll give you some examples. In fact, that's where the term Internet of Things came from. Because when we were thinking about it, people would say to us, why do you want to connect these stupid things to the Internet? And by the way, what is the Internet? In 1998, people didn't know what the Internet was. I remember I had my Motorola brick phone, remember those things? Right, that you can hit someone, it's a good self-defense mechanism. I remember holding it up at a conference and saying, someday this will be on the Internet. And I remember people saying, this guy is nuts. And I remember thinking, I probably am nuts. Right? And now, of course, we have this. Right? And how ubiquitous is it? Have you met someone recently who does not own a smartphone, an adult? You cannot. I met one recently, actually. He's an MIT professor. That's a whole other story. This is how powerful technology is. Now, where will RFID take off? I think we should think outside the box. I think we should start thinking about RFID all over. Let me give you an example, something actually that we are working on. I have Nitin here and I have Rahul here from the MIT group. Let's consider something that's hot and sexy right now, which is autonomous cars. Do you think RFID has a play in autonomous cars? What do you think? Where would it be? What would we do with it? There's a poster session in which there's one poster on this topic. Let me give you an example of how I think we could do it. So, autonomy today is based on smart cars, dumb roads. Think about it. We put all the intelligence in the cars, and the roads remain as dumb as ever. How ironic is it that a high-end sensor package in a Tesla or an Audi comes up to a streetlight, and then it does the following. It recognizes 3 circles. It says, one of the circles seems to be red, therefore I should stop. That is ridiculous. How should you really do it? It should ask the streetlight, hey, are you red? And the streetlight should say, perhaps in RF, I am red. And then the streetlight can say to the car, not only am I red, there's an accident down the street, there's black ice on the street, turn right. Why are we thinking this way? Why is every streetlight, why are we caught in the trap where we look at the world the way it was before? And the strange thing is, this is our domain. That belongs to this room. Okay? Here's another one. So, in ADAS systems, advanced driver automation, assistance systems, there's lane holding, right? To keep the car in the lane. How does it do it? It looks for white marks on the road. Really? If it rains, it can't find those white marks because of the reflection. But just imagine, roads have those little shiny dividers. Imagine if every divider had an RFID in it. Imagine how much more accurate your location could be, how much more information you could garner from it, and how much safer the whole world would be. Right now, in the United States, to help the economy, there's an effort to roll out an infrastructure bill. It's been distracted. Every time we talk about it in the US, something happens in the White House. But apparently there's an effort to roll out an infrastructure bill. They're going to just retard the roads using technologies from 20 years ago. Why not put in smart dividers? That belongs to this room. There is no one else who will take it on. And they could be photovoltaic powered, they could be directional, they could use phased array, they could be microwave, millimeter wave, right? It's just such a huge opportunity. Smart roads, smart cars. And that's just one example. Cars. You can do this with buildings. You can do this with cities. You can do this with power grids. You can do this with infrastructure. You can do this with transportation, public transportation, shipping. You folks have in your extraordinary, the knowledge in this room, you have the verbs and the nouns hidden somewhere inside your minds. I think we should start waking ourselves up and articulating the new language instead of limiting ourselves to just RFID on the one hand and letting someone else construct the language, right? I'll end with this. Let us say that it's 1990, we're all in 1990, which is not that long ago, and you look through a wormhole, a rift in time, and you can see two teenagers in 2018, but you're in 1990, okay? And you see one teenager say to the other, just a few words, I will WhatsApp my location to you. You're like, what the hell does that mean? Fortunately, there's a very smart professor, young professor, on the other side who says, I will explain it to you. So this is what she has to explain to you. She has to explain to you, first of all, there is this thing called the internet. It will go wireless. There is a thing called a cell phone. You know those suitcases? There used to be suitcases in the 90s. The cell phone is a suitcase. Mm-hmm. It'll become very small. Those phones, they'll become very small. They'll have battery life enough to last a whole day. The screens will be really big. They will have the internet. You know those, when you look at a ship and you see those big antennae, that's called GPS. Someday, that'll become so small, it'll fit inside this. There's this thing called social networking. There's a company called Facebook. It paid $19 billion for yet another company called WhatsApp. Every teenager has one of these things. Every teenager pretty much is on WhatsApp. Oh, by the way, the maps of the world will fit inside this. And when one teenager said to the other, I will WhatsApp my location to you, embedded in that little tip of the iceberg, is a spectacular underwater plethora of technologies, innovations, inventions, blood, sweat, tears, failed companies, corporate careers, bets, billions of dollars of investment in that little new sentence. I will WhatsApp my location to you, right? And I believe that what we are doing here is going to enable a whole new area. We'll be one piece of it. There's BLE, there's Wi-Fi, there's 5G, 6G, but I think that last meter is owned by this community. So thank you very much. Thanks for doing this, and really what a pleasure to be here. I look forward to the panel. Thanks very much.